Bismillah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, I'm back in the Maktabah and I'm honored to have a guest this time who I've been trying to get here for quite a while. Alhamdulillah, he finally managed to make it down from Leicester. I'm happy to introduce Shaykh Abubakar Al Khalafi. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Barakallahu feekum for coming down, for taking time out. And inshallah, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward you for the effort that you've put coming down from Leicester. Alhamdulillah. Let's begin. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you? And just a brief introduction to the audience.
Allah musta'an. I don't really do introductions too well, but yeah, just a slave of Allah. Ask Allah to forgive me for my shortcomings. Born in Netherlands, raised in the UK, travelled to Medina about over a decade ago, and that sort of summarizes my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Born in Netherlands,
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah, raised in Leicester. Came to UK how old then?
About 8.
Okay, about 8.
8,
So
9,
you
yeah.
did some primary school over there. Do you speak Dutch?
No, I forgot it now. I completely forgot it. I lost that.
Alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Came to the UK, so it's primary school in the UK, secondary school in the UK, college in the UK,
Yeah.
uni in the UK.
I started uni
Yeah.
here in London, actually.
Yeah.
In my first semester, I got accepted to Jamia.
Okay,
So
mashallah.
immediately just, stopped and then flew out.
You stopped and went.
Yeah.
Were your parents upset about that?
No. To be honest, my story of getting into the Jamia, I probably will get to anyway.
Yeah.
But I travelled to Umrah with my mother the year before that. And as I was waiting on outside the hotel, when we're looking for going on a ziyarah, going around the different sort of monumental sort of places that people visit in Medina. And I stepped out and I was looking for a taxi driver that I could tell, I didn't speak Arabic at the time, but I needed to tell him that we want to go by Uhud and this and that and so on.
How old?
I would have been 17 at the time.
Okay, yeah.
So I stepped out and there was this driver that stops for me, and he basically says to me, you don't have to try and speak Arabic, I speak English. And he spoke a basic amount of English because he served in the military and he was involved in the whole alongside the American sort of army and during the Gulf Wars and everything. So he kind of knew a bit of English. He spoke really well, actually. Yeah. And so he basically just takes me on that, that tour along with my family, my mother and my brothers and so on. And as I remember, we was at Uhud. He basically says to me, look, I brought it up and I said, I'm trying to apply to the Jamia. I've got all my documents and everything. And he says, look, there is something called Amadat Qabul Sijil, where it's basically where the acceptance department is and so on. My first cousin works there.
MashaAllah.
And so the next day he picks me up from the hotel and we drove to the Jamia. I did my interview and he takes me to the Amid of Qabul Tasjil. And the Amid basically takes my number, my application number. Straight away. And I think the following year, after I got accepted to the universities that I had applied for, he calls me and he says, look, don't bother going to university because in a few months, the list is going to come out and you're in it. I've just received news from thing. Wow. And it was back in those days where the university didn't have a proper portal. Yeah. Where it was like students would just go and take it and then just stick names on blogs and so on.
Yeah.
That's like exactly
the good old days.
Yeah, I love that. So I was kind of waiting for these blog sites and everything to kind of release names. But I had received the phone call. I was pretty certain that that Amid's not gonna make something like that up.
Yeah.
If he told his cousin I got accepted, I probably got accepted. But my father was like, Arabs are a bit wishy-washy. Potentially, you may not have even accepted for this year. It might be for another year or something like that. Don't delay going to university.
Yeah, which was good advice because the exact same thing happened to me. I was told by someone I was accepted, not that high up, that Amid, but it was like, your name's on there while I was on Hajj. Okay. I'm like, okay, great. SubhanAllah. But that year, everyone got accepted apart from me, the group that I was with basically, and I got accepted the following year. But so mashallah. So your dad's advice was solid.
So just go to university. Start. So I did everything. Went to university here in London actually, and started the course. And I think my first weekend, or maybe I finished my first week. I was in my second week when the list came out. And yeah, some brothers in Leicester called me and said, there's a list out, and my name was on it. And I think I'd just come back from uni. I think I'd slept for like a little bit for the afternoon and woke up to all these missed calls and stuff. Yeah, I think the rest was history. I basically just packed my bags and jumped on a National Express that same day and went back home.
Yeah.
And then just a couple of months later flew out to...
That was it, you was in Medina.
Yeah.
SubhanAllah, look at that. May Allah reward the taxi driver, and hopefully one day maybe even sees this as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because look at that, SubhanAllah, that that opportunity, like this, Qadr Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right?
Yeah.
The taxi driver, you were there to apply anyway, you were ready to apply, and he's the one that kind of, Allah put him there to facilitate and to help that happen. And that was it. It was, like you said, the rest was history.
Yeah. The interesting thing for me was the Amid that had helped me, or basically was the middleman we were getting to try and sort it out from Wizar al-Ta'lim and the Ministry of Education and so on, passed away in the year that I graduated.
Wow.
So it was like, subhanAllah, it was like, he was there at the beginning, and I'd met him a few times as well.
Yeah.
I remember attending a wedding of one of his sons and so on. And I graduated my bachelor's, and I was waiting to get my acceptance to the master's. And I'd attended his funeral as well.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah, so SubhanAllah. It was a huge reminder.
Yeah.
And even as I went to visit like the family and everything, it was like, you think about those ayat, about وَمَن يَشْفَعْ شَفَاعَةً حَسَنَةً, and like how far-reaching that is. Because his cousin, who gone to speak to me on behalf of the taxi driver, he had actually, it was one of the things that he would often remind me of, that, like your efforts and everything could potentially be, a reason for reward for him. Reward for him as he's moved on from this world. And so it was something that would play into my mind all the time. Wherever you can help somebody, whether it's like, verbally and, speak up to try and, facilitate some sort of goodness for a Muslim, or you can write something or whatever it is, all of that comes back to serve you at the end of the day, because you don't know where the khair lies. And so any opportunity that you have to help another Muslim do something that is of khair and goodness, it could all come to benefit you in your grave and the day that you meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't lose out on that.
Jazakallah khair. That's I think that's really powerful in the time we live in, where people are kind of like, sometimes it's a case of, okay, well, what am I getting from it?
Exactly, yeah.
Right? They're always looking for what they can get from something, so they don't want to help someone. It's like, well, I did it myself, you do it by yourself as well. You know what I mean? We lack people that do want to intercede on other, without them getting anything, but they don't understand the bigger picture.
It was stuff like, I'm sure we'll get to it, but you get sometimes like, you ask for like a tazkiyah.
Yeah.
And the troubles that you sometimes get into to try and I do understand the level of like that you have to take these sort of things, because at the end of the day it is a trust, and I'll get to a very important story for that in my master's years, but it is a trust, and people are going to act upon that letter that you write, and write that endorsement and recommendation and so on. But it's something that is so simple, but it can have like huge consequences as well. So it's also important to be reasonable as we navigate that space. And a very important moment for me with regards to that as well was just before I got to the Jamia. When I knew I wanted to apply, I went to these winter conferences in Birmingham. Yeah. And obviously, but back in those days, there was like the Green Lane Masjid sort of conference, and then there was the Wright Street Salafi Masjid conference. Yeah. And I tried to attend both and do a bit of a mix and match, whatever classes. I remember I was really impacted by a lecture of Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali that year. And it wasn't like, by the time I'd started the Jamia, and I from the moment I heard his voice and the translation of his lecture, I said, I want to really meet that scholar. Yeah. And I started the Ma'had, and he passed away, subhanAllah, in my, I think, first semester or first year. And it was like this moment of get that knowledge before the scholars move on. But Sheikh Falah, Ismail Mundakar came as well to the conference in Wright Street at the time. And I think he was the only person that I felt like I could get access to, because I thought, you know, I could get somebody to speak to somebody and then, you know, get a tazkiyah. Yeah. So I went to the masjid and I stayed for his lecture, and I spoke to somebody to try and speak to the admin at the masjid to get my to get a tazkiyah so I could apply to the jamia, and that was the second tazkiyah I needed. So what happened was he basically said, fine, but you know, can you back tomorrow? And I never got my actual sort of tazkiyah, but he said to me tomorrow basically. And I think I ended up going to Leicester the next day before I got it, and I got the second tazkiyah from someone else.
Okay.
So whilst I was in Magister, and I flew to Kuwait, and this was subhanAllah months before he passed away. And
Shaykh Abdulwahid had passed away.
Rahimahullah. And I ended up like leaving before I could actually meet him. I was at the airport. So I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and he was kind of asking me about my experience in Kuwait. And then suddenly I said, Akhi, look, there's a phone call from, because I had Shaykh Abdullah's number saved. Shaykh Abdullah called me. I was like, Akhi, pick up, you know, it's Shaykh. So I pick up and we start talking. And I did mention this incident to him. I said, you know, a couple of years ago, I'm in my masters now and I'm writing my thesis and so on. But some years ago, I basically come to Birmingham and I wanted a tazkiyah, and I just wanted to say, ask Allah to place, you know, my efforts in your Mizan Hasanat. You were quite welcoming. Even though I didn't get what I wanted. But
you didn't turn me away.
Exactly. I felt really, you know, you were really approachable, and it was a really good experience having met you on that personal sort of thing, even though I didn't quite get the tazkiyah that I wanted the following day. And I remember he just burst into tears. And it was one of my, I don't think it was the last time I'd spoken to him. And after that, shortly after that, it was like, he couldn't speak anymore, like from that, you know, moment onwards. But yeah, it's I think that thing is a huge thing for me, which is like throughout that journey of like traveling and so on, you have all these individuals that kind of open the doors for you and are always there for you. And it's always important to remember them as well.
It's true. I ask Allah that inshallah we do the same for others.
Absolutely.
And there are also a cause of other people making dua for us, because we take that trait and implement it in our own journeys as well. That's really important. So apparently we've covered a lot and we've jumped a lot. But I didn't give your introduction its dues, in the sense that you're, mashallah, tabarakallah, you've graduated from the Islamic University of Medina with your bachelor's, and you did a master's afterwards as well. And inshallah, you're putting forward for a PhD as well, inshallah, which is obviously a lot of years studying. I think you mentioned 12 years of studying. But before we get to your in the Jamidas, tell me about how you was at school. College, what was life like at college? Were you always practicing or not? Because some people think, you know, students of knowledge were always students of knowledge. They were always, I can't do it because I wasn't practicing at some point. What was your kind of journey before you went to the Jamia?
For me, I think practicing wise, well, istiqamah is a heavy word, and I think, you know, obviously suffice it as a like a great sort of commandment in our religion is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded his prophet with it. Fastaqim kama umirt. And you know, we just, you know, ask Allah Azza wa Jal to keep us steadfast throughout our lives. And I think the great part of it as well is like, you know, to try and be as steadfast as possible in public and in private and in all of our affairs. I wouldn't really go that far. I would probably just say the beautiful thing about my life, and alhamdulillah for that, is my father had built or founded a masjid in Leicester, I think 2004. So shortly after we moved there. And so I kind of grew up in that sort of
environment, basically in a masjid type environment, which is a blessing,
alhamdulillah,
a massive blessing.
So even though, like, you know, things do come up, but just like the sort of attachment is a huge thing. And I think even bigger than that, sometimes, like, and again, this is why I say, like, true istiqamah to me is also like the intention behind why you do things. So like doing things because it's pleasing to Allah, avoiding things because it is displeasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes it's like you're in this position and you kind of feel like you kind of do things because it's almost like expected of you. It's like you come from that family, you're part of the, you know, that masjid. You can't be seen doing certain things and so on. And obviously, that is not a true sort of like submission and servitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You kind of have to, the drive also has to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and your intentions have to be quite clear as well. But yeah, besides that, quite often I wouldn't find myself in the wrong things.
Alhamdulillah.
You know,
That's the ni'mah.
the
May Allah reward your father. What's the masjid?
Masjid Quba in Leicester.
In Leicester, alhamdulillah. And it's still an active masjid.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, yeah.
That's where you're teaching at the moment as well,
Yes,
which we'll come back
most
to.
of my classes and so on, yeah.
So we've heard that you left university because you got accepted at the Jamia, and you actually would have got accepted before anyway. Tell me about, you know, you go into the Jamia now.
Yeah.
How was it? What year was it? How old was you?
So I got accepted 2011. I left a few months after I got accepted, so the paperwork and everything. Started officially with the first semester that came afterwards would have been, I think I would have started a Ma'had around January of 2012. Yeah. That would be my first semester. So 2 years in the Ma'had. The Ma'had, I think everybody has their own stories because it's such an interesting time. So it's like
Ma'had, just explain it quickly to everyone.
So the Ma'had is the Arabic Institute in Medina. It's quite diverse, with the exception of obviously Arabs. You tend to get like a variety of different backgrounds, from people from Europe, Africa, a lot of Asian countries as well, and just all sorts of like walks of life. And most classes are really diverse. So I remember my first class in the Ma'had, and I still remember the teacher as well, Jazakallah khairan, Hafidhullah, Shaykh Nasir, and it was an experience because like he goes through the classroom and he just asks everybody like, what's your name and what country are you from? And you're just like so baffled by like just sitting inside this classroom with people from like countries you've never heard of. Like you might just go home and start searching like, does such a country actually exist, or was he making it up, sort of thing? And it was really interesting. So one of the things I remember as well was he'd kind of see us in alphabetical order. So, you know, move about, kind of have like everybody as person like Alif and so on over there and about here, and it'd go through it like that. So obviously from there, like you get this structure, and I would always end up being either, because even like in other class, the registered Medina, because my name's Abubakar. Yeah, you're first. I'd always be first or second. Or second, like, because you're Ibrahim, Alif and then Ba. Yeah, you're like, unless there's an Ibrahim in the class, I was always the first person to register. So the Ma'had there was one brother, I think American brother, that his name actually was Ibrahim. So I was the second person for that semester on the register. But you know, the second you start going through other classes, other sort of students, their names and their backgrounds and where they're from and so on, it got really interesting. I think the biggest sort of thing was in a Ma'had was the whole learning Arabic, or teach. To be honest, I didn't feel bad for myself trying to learn Arabic from somebody that couldn't speak the same language as me. I feel bad for the teachers for trying to teach Arabic to people of all of these different languages.
There's not even one unifying language.
Exactly. If you tried to translate something in English, half the class wouldn't understand. If you were French, you know, the other half wouldn't understand. It was just really, I felt really bad for him in essence. Because I remember like sometimes there were words where like I remember one of the words like that caught a couple of people. It's like, hold on, like I think in one of the books and stuff like mi'taf, like a jacket. And then some students like, I don't really understand. And it's like the good thing about the books is they've got all these drawings and so on. But there's like certain words that, you know, they don't have the drawings. Exactly. So I think somebody tried to put his hand up, and obviously Medina's quite hot for most of the year, so who's wearing a jacket to begin with, and so he's trying to explain it to him in a way where it's like, oh, you take it off when you go home and this and that, and it was like I understood, but I sat there, I was like, none of this is helping him. It was a really fun experience, and Ma'had was so enjoyable. It was so enjoyable. A lot of like experiences, a lot of fun memories. I think the people I got to know there, I kept such I kept in contact even till today. SubhanAllah, I was on my way here right now, and some brothers that I knew from the Ma'had, I would still message them. All these years later.
In other countries, doing their own thing now. You're right. I mean, even up to today, there's people, you see them either doing talks publicly, or of them, and you usually meet up together at Umrah or Hajj or these types. You bump into people again from America, European countries.
Yeah.
So it's really amazing. The network you build and the friendships and the brotherhood you build there is amazing.
SubhanAllah. For me, it's almost like, sometimes especially when you go there really young, I'm not sure how young you were.
I was 25.
At 25.
So you were like 18, you was like,
quite a bit younger.
I was married, had a child type of thing, so yeah.
It's almost like you formed this almost like this brotherly bond, and it was really tight. Like you go and eat together, in the afternoons you go to the haram together, and it's like, you're constantly doing things together. And so it forms like a really, really close bond, especially since it's like, it's like, it was the first time leaving my parents' house, and so the friendships really mattered.
So in Ma'had's 2 years where you're studying Arabic as well as some Islamic subjects, so that to prepare you to study a degree in Islamic sciences, right? While you were in Ma'had, holidays, were you coming home? Did you stay when you came home?
I would, so I did come back, I think the second year, I came back right away. The first year, and I wish I did it more, to be honest, but I stayed back for the Quran Dawras. I don't know if you remember. It's like you like stay in like a masjid in Ta'if, and it'd go on for like a month, or like
intensive every day,
throughout the day, where you'd revise and also like memorize some more as well. And it was really beautiful. Like subhanAllah, to be honest, I didn't get into the Ta'if one, so I travelled there, even though my name never came out. So I thought what would happen is some student would drop out and just go home, and then I could squeeze in. So I got there, and everybody's like kind of being like taken to their thing.
Ta'if is quite far from, and it's far from Medina. It's not it's closer to Mecca, obviously.
Exactly, It was a journey to get there.
It was a journey to get there,
So I think we did Umrah, and then we drove up the mountain and got to the masjid where the Dawra was being held. I think by morning, it became clear to us like this Dawra is like overfilled, and even after all the individuals that had been accepted, there was like a surplus of people that are trying to squeeze in. So I kind of said to myself, like, the chances of me being like getting accepted after all of this is quite slim. So I think I was with another brother, a brother from Canada, a Somali brother as well, and he basically says, oh, you know what, there's a Dawra in Riyadh, and they're doing a similar sort of thing, except that I think they didn't have the after Isha class. So they had the after Fajr, after Asr, after Maghrib, but didn't have the fourth session after Isha. So it was a bit more, it was less intense, but I think they kind of coupled it with classes and lectures and so on. So we decided to go there, called the guy, the guy that was managing the program, and he said, we've got loads of you. And so we just jumped on a taxi and drove all the way to Riyadh.
That's another like 8-hour drive or 7-hour drive or something like that.
So we got to the masjid and just settled in. Alhamdulillah, was there for, I think, that year all the way to like the beginning of Ramadan. And then after Ramadan, came back to Medina. Stayed like a portion of Ramadan in Medina with trips to like Mecca. Just prayed in Masjid Nabawi and so on. And then like the last portion of the thing, flew back. But it was really good. It was really good. If I could go back, I would have done more of that. To be honest.
So would you advise students that are there now from the UK to spend some summers doing that, or every holiday enroll in a program like that while they're there, or come back sometimes? What would you?
Well, it's a difficult one, because it's looking back at it, because I remember there was like one other summer, I can't remember which year it would have been exactly for me, but I remember there was like a class being done in the Masjid of Shaykh Ibn Baz in the campus by a number of scholars, amongst them with Shaykh Abdulwahid Al Badr. And I remember he was going through Kitab al-Ilm of Ibn Abi Khaythama. And one of the things he actually mentioned was that and obviously the people that remained were people that were staying behind for the summer sort of programs and so on. And his advice was just, these summer programs were kind of, or the summer break was kind of made so that, you could combine between seeking knowledge and going back and engaging in something like birr al-walidain and being there for your family and being there for your parents, and also engaging a bit of da'wah as well. And obviously combining between obviously al-jam'u بين الشيئين عموما, like combining between things is much more preferred than isolating one thing and leaving off something else. Yeah. And so his advice was obviously to go back.
Mashallah, that's nice, because he's teaching and he's telling everyone, you should not be here, go home.
Exactly, yeah. And subhanAllah, I didn't realize how important of an advice that was up until like the years go by, and obviously you age as well. And but the biggest, like, sometimes it's difficult to like look at yourself in the mirror and sort of feel like how many years have gone by for you.
Yeah.
I think maybe you can inform me of that, but
obviously,
like, it hits you suddenly.
It hits you suddenly. That's exactly what happens. It happens like that. 100%.
I always hear like with age, you kind of notice it with other people. So like, for example, kids. You have a child and you suddenly notice, like, they start talking, they start walking, they start doing this and they start doing that, and then you realize, oh, like that many years have gone by. And you forget about how many years you were married, how many years, this had gone on, and all the rest of it. And similarly, I think with, you also notice it with parents.
Yeah.
So like, you leave and your parents are young and fit and healthy and everything else. And as the years go by, you start to come back, they've aged more, they require your help and support. And it was, I think it's easy to look at it as, you've got this opportunity and this window where you can benefit. But it's almost like you can also forget about the responsibilities that you have towards your family and so on. And so, subhanAllah, I remember even that advice never really hit me up until, so I took a gap year in my master's. Yeah. And so my classmates, some of them were defending their thesis before I had finished. And so there was this one brother, when I started Easy Affairs, he's an amazing brother, I love greatly. And his mother had passed away of cancer, rahimahullah, of stage 4 cancer, of some form of cancer. I can't remember now. But whilst he was waiting to defend his thesis. Oh. So it was like, he actually wanted to go back and then come back. And the university was like, look, why don't you just finish everything and then just go back? Yeah, fully. And in that period where he was almost like just wrapping up everything, waiting for, the date of the thesis and defend his thesis and edit and then resubmit and just get his master's degree and go home. Like days before that, his mother passed away and he had to fly back for her janazah and everything. And it was moments like that really hits you. Yeah. Because subhanAllah, death comes suddenly. Yeah. And the older one gets,
Yeah, that's right.
The more
there's more. Closer you get to death.
Sometimes it's not even just about you. They are grandparents as well.
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah. So there's so many layers to it. Yeah. And so I think the summer holidays are an amazing opportunity to actually spend some time
with family and give dawah and do other things as well. So after the ma'had, what kulliyah did you pick, and why did you pick that kulliyah? I was going to ask you, because just for the purpose of causing a bit of controversy again, Bayna Yadayk and Medina series, but we'll leave that for another topic, I guess.
Oh, actually, I think I like that question. Actually,
yeah, you do. Let's go for it then. Let's put that out there.
Arabi Bayna Yadayk and Medina series.
Arabi Bayna Yadayk or the Medina series?
I'll say neither.
Okay, go on. Tell me why.
I would say
for students in the UK, we're speaking about, right?
Yeah. I would say curriculums don't really. I would say for most people that I've seen, even in people that have learned Arabic in the West and so on, it was never really the curriculum that built them. Like it's there is a certain personality that or certain personality traits that I've seen that really make some people like. Their journey in Arabic so different to somebody else's. One of the biggest ones is obviously not being a mustahi or mutakabbir. And كما جاء في الأثر, right? As in, you can find in narrations where it's important for the student of knowledge to not be shy and not to be arrogant either. I think it's important to just be willing to accept that you're going to say things wrong. And so
Yeah.
you kind of have to, like, you do notice this in classes where people are willing to engage, and sometimes like you interact with scholars. I remember the first time I think I asked somebody a question, and only Allah knows what came out my mouth. But you know, it's not even that. Like the Shaykh looked at me and just corrected what I said, and it could have gone both ways after that. It was like, you know what, I can't speak properly. Let me not do that again.
Never speak again.
Or like, yeah, you know, it's a learning experience. I'm gonna do better next time.
Yeah.
And let me take the points that they brought up and bear that in mind as the next time I approach a scholar for a question. And I think that's how you grow. And I think the book series, it's both of them, like the emphasis is on random things. And I think the journey of like Arabic for most people, I don't really, I think there are people that just generally love Arabic for Arabic.
Yeah.
I think they do exist. And I know a couple of people like that. But I think most people, I think, want to learn Arabic to understand the speech of Allah.
Yeah.
They want to learn Arabic because they want to have a better relationship with the Quran, especially in prayers, Taraweeh, like, you know, to kind of understand this message of the Quran and really be able to like make some form of tadabbur, like sort of like think and ponder and reflect over its verses, so that, you know, it has that impact on our hearts. I don't think these books are kind of made like that. They're a bit more like, you know, I remember, this is just, I'm sure everybody has their own version of this, including yourself, Sheikh. But the first time I went to like a sufra in Masjid al-Nabawi after I started the Ma'had, and the sufra is like the like Monday, Thursdays.
Where you break your fast, they put out dates
and drinks and so on, yeah. And I remember I went to like this sufra, and there was like a Saudi old man, and he was handing stuff out, and I think as I came, I just said salam to him, and he went wa alaikum salam. I could kind of, even like in his interaction, I could tell he was kind of like, oh, not again, sort of thing. And as if he started talking, and again, I can't really speak that well, but he starts telling me like he loves students of knowledge greatly, but the problem he finds is that, you know, the students of knowledge that start the Ma'had, and, you know, the first time they come to the Haram in the beginning of the year, they start repeating the questions from the books.
Yeah.
So it's like every year he's dealing with the same questions. It's like masmuk wa majinsiyyatuk wa min ayna anta, and all these different things. And the brother's like, you know, I've had to put up with this for years, and he's really old. Like every year someone's asking about my jinsiyya and my this, my that.
And the Jami has been open a long time.
Exactly, yeah. So what happened was he kind of says to me, look, so I offered it. I said, can you give me some advice on, like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I want a conversation, because I did. The teachers made it very clear to us. The more you speak, the more you attempt to interact, the better your experience is going to be, and the more you're going to learn.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the purpose of a language is, you know, the experience of it. It's like utilizing it both in like reading, writing, obviously understanding, comprehension, and speaking as well. Yeah. And you got to try and create like your relationship with the Arabic language has got to be like balanced on all sides, because you need all of that.
Yeah.
You need to be able to understand the statements of scholars well, so how you're going to learn.
Yeah. You
need to be able to speak well, how you're going to ask questions when you don't know. You can't really express yourself. You need to be able to read and write, because obviously they're really important in you know, your academic journey. And so the best scenario is where the person has is a balanced person from all angles. Yeah. Like there's no point, like there's very little. There is a benefit, but the complete benefit is where you have all of these different skills that relate to the language. And so where somebody is really strong in reading, but he can't ask questions, it kind of creates a scenario where you can't really interact with individuals, but you can just grab a book and understand. And so if you misunderstand, if you've got a question about it, you've kind of like, kind of shut the door of, you know, interacting with scholars and gaining that benefit of understanding things better. You kind of closed it on yourself. And so I kind of knew the importance of going out and speaking. Yeah. But when I got to Masjid Nabawi, I met that uncle, and he was like, "Look, can we try? You know, can you just be a normal person and ask me things that you care about instead of random things from a book, and we can have a good relationship, sort of thing." And Jazakallah khair, he was another like really impactful person in my life, because I would come to him, and I, generally speaking, I had questions, like just the general sort of Saudi experience and whatnot. And he would say, "Look, try and express yourself, and I'll try and like help you in finding the right words for that."
Nice.
And that was how I kind of grew.
That's
and so
really
I'd have my defter, I'd have like a book in my pocket, and I would just jot down
Phrases.
individual words and phrases and sentences and whatnot that I thought were more important, instead of asking him random things about, you know, like we took the weather today. And just like, you know.
That's a lovely tip.
Exactly.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So that's something that even students in the UK could implement in terms of being balanced in how they're learning and all the subjects.
Yeah.
So you chose Kulit Sharia as opposed to Hadith or Dawah, or you didn't? What happened?
I chose Hadith.
Okay.
I chose Hadith.
MashaAllah.
Was it the same for your year as well, when they give you like 3 options?
I had the 3 options one.
Okay. So you actually picked 3 different options? Or?
I actually picked 3 different options. They didn't give me the first one or the second one. They gave me the third one, and I complained about it. So I picked Sharia, I think Hadith, and then Usul al-Din.
Yeah.
And then they put me in Usul al-Din, and I'm like, why? So it'll be better for you. And I'm like, no, I want to go Sharia, and that was it.
Okay.
I was insistent. Then they put me in Sharia afterwards. Yeah.
I thought Hadith. I just thought that's where I was going. And I think those years in my life, I think the conversation of madhab is a huge one, especially now for me, and the importance of madhab and so on. And obviously people have different takes on it. But at the time, or at that sort of time frame, I was very sort of like the evidence sort of hadith and the fiqh of sunnah, and you know, those type of things were really big on me. So I was kind of like really driven by that. And so it was almost like I just want to, like, if I did want to apply something, it would have been through like the understanding of a hadith and apply that. And I wasn't so madhab orientated.
Would that be because based upon your environment, was you kind of like, look, the Sharia are for people that are have mumayya, and Hadith are for the Salafis that are wadih and are clear on their manhaj? But if you go Sharia, you got, was that impacted there or not?
I don't really feel it's that. To be honest, I can't like, I wouldn't say that was the main driver. But to be completely honest as well, I think one thing I did sort of know at those years as well is that there is a certain way that I think students of knowledge are supposed to carry themselves, and there's a certain way that you're supposed to behave, and like I think adab and majalis al-ilm, like the etiquettes and the mannerisms that you're supposed to have in the classes of knowledge and things like that were really big on me. I think in when I went to Kulit al-Hadith before my time in the Ma'had was up, and when I went to Sharia, that was one of the things that really hit me. So you go to Hadith and you see like people reading Quran and memorizing, you know, a Hadith in like the corner of like just the corridors and in the musalla, and people praying constantly. And it was like there's a level of like, a huge thing for me was the haiba. You know, famous narration, al-imanu hayyun. It's like a level of like respect and almost like this sort of status that comes with being somebody of like religiosity and knowledge and stuff like that. And I felt like that sort of like behavior or that conduct was there in Hadith a lot more. It's like, you know, this is what knowledge is, because I think I was kind of driven by that a little bit more. I felt Sharia was going back to it, I love it so much. Like it was the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. But I think the first time I went in, obviously it's a lot of I think Saudis, and that was a bit fun as well, because, you know, it was very, I wouldn't say it's like for them it's a bit more of a
qualification, profession. It's a career basically. It's a career option.
So they kind of come in, you know, in a certain manner, because it's just a university for them. I think Westerners kind of go there for talib al-ilm a bit more, so it's a different experience. So I did notice that. So the seriousness of like
that's what was
kulliyah, it hit
pushing
me,
you,
but it wasn't the main drive.
Yeah.
I think the main drive was just already
Hadith,
there, where
yeah.
I just sort of felt like a more evidence-based approach would have been better.
Yeah.
But subhanallah, the exams come are Mustawa Rabi', the fourth and the last semester in the Ma'had, and I thought that my exam happened to be, I think, the later exam, like a 10:30 exam, when it was actually an 8 o'clock one.
Yeah.
So I got to the exam hall after everybody left, and I'd realised that my exam was 8:30.
So you missed your exam?
I missed my exam.
First time it's happened?
Yeah, first time it's happened.
And it's the last exam of
the last exam of
graduate from the Ma'had.
Exactly, yeah. So I missed that exam, and then ended up doing the rest of the exams on time and attended, and I had to redo that exam. So, and alhamdulillah, it was an experience that I knew I never wanted to do again.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the whole redoing exams in the Jamia, it's quite annoying because I basically was told, look, you need to redo this exam. You need to move on to kulliyah as well.
Yeah.
So try and sign up, try and attend classes, because they're quite slow with the whole marking, and then later on getting you into the kulliyah and everything. So it's like, so you don't miss out on anything, go and attend classes, but at the same time, you know, this process is going to take a while.
Yeah.
So it ended up taking like almost like 2 months for me to get settled in the class.
Yeah.
So redoing the exam, getting my grades, submitting it to the Amada, then passing on to the kulliyah. It just took forever. And I was given a good sort of rule early on, as soon as I came, by a Dutch brother that'd been there for a while. And he said to me, like, you'd love being in Medina as long as, you know, you don't have to go to like an office and deal with like the admin team and deal with paperwork and stuff like that. Yeah. And this was just one of those ones where it just took so much longer than it needed to. Yeah. So a brother, a very good brother actually from London, a good friend of mine, basically says to me, look, why don't you come to Shariah and, you know, like, give it a bit more time. Like, the classes are amazing. Come and sit down with us and see what you think. And so I went to some classes in Shariah, and I really loved it. Like the Usul class and Bidayat al-Mujtahid, the Fiqh al-Muqaran. And it was so good that I thought, what am I even thinking about? You know, going to Hadith and Muharrar and you know,
it's Hadith 3 times as well. It's Hadith.
Exactly. Yeah. This is where I need to be. Yeah. So as soon as I got my you know, my certificate from the Ma'had and all the rest of it, I said, I want to go Sharia. What happened to Hadith? I need you to put me into Sharia, you know. Just listen to it. I made a mistake. And it was like a massive sort of shift. But yeah, it was for the best. One of the things I really loved about, I think, Sharia, and I'd love to hear your experience as well last time, but I think it's the Fiqh al-Muqaran, and I think Usul al-Fiqh as well. Yeah. So it's the fact that, you know, the back and forths among scholars was, it's not just, it's almost like it's not even just the norm and the standard anymore. Yeah. It's almost like that's what you're looking forward to. Yeah. So for me, my experience in Sharia actually was waking up every single morning and thinking, you know, how the Malik is going to get back to the Hanafis this time around. Like, what's going to happen in this chapter? And who's, you know, because Ibn Rushd in his Bidayat al-Mujtahid, the way he kind of like structures it is so argumentative, and there's almost like all these back and forth, and he comes to the end and say, well, this is the reason why they differed, like Sabab al-Khilaf. It was really beautiful. Yeah. And
can you elucidate a bit more about the book? Because I think the book's amazing. I love the book, and I'm so happy that they brought it back. I think they brought it back now, haven't they?
They brought it back, but I think besides the first year.
Besides the first year,
and then the last 3 years.
It's a book that needs to be studied at university level.
Yeah.
Tell us a bit about the book, and because you've explained it anyway, but and then from that we can jump into Takhrij al-Furu' ala al-Usul, inshallah, and Maqasid al-Sharia, obviously, and then your masters as well. Inshallah.
So Bidayat al-Mujtahid is a book that's written by Ibn Rushd al-Hafid. Not to confuse him with his grandfather, who was also a very great Maliki scholar. He wrote the book around the time where he was appointed to Qadha in you know, some city in Andalus, I forgot now. And for the bulk of it, it was a summarization of Ibn Abdul Bar's Istidkar, or at least he seems to have taken from it heavily anyway.
Yeah.
And his approach seems to be that he would look for not just any khilaf, because khilaf is endless, you know,
Yeah.
but look for like the major issues, like usul khilaf, like the huge issues that then have an impact on other issues. And he would kind of like study that between the three madhab. He doesn't really consider Imam Ahmad's madhab to be a madhab. That was the sort of like the status quo. That's how, what they considered. The Hanbalis at the time. It was more or less extinct.
Yeah.
So it's mainly between, it was like the Hanafis and the Malikis and the Shafi'is, and it might allude to like the qawl of Imam Ahmad, or the Ahl Hadith, or something of the nature, and the Zahiriyya as well.
Yeah.
And he kind of approaches it as well by bringing up some of their strongest evidences. And then he comes to the end by explaining that the reason why they differed, and it goes back to some sort of a usul issue.
Yeah.
That this group gave preference to the mafhum to, you know, something else, and you know, there's always like that sort of issue. And so with that, you kind of learn the combination of the aqwal al-fiqhiyya in like these sort of like major, the sort of like the fiqh differences, and the different viewpoints in these major issues of khilaf, in these major differences like that happen amongst the scholars of Islam. You come across evidences, or some of the strongest evidences that each group kind of utilize and use and so on. You kind of almost learn principles as well.
Yeah.
Because there's some things that come up, and you know, you look at the evidence and you're like, I'm in Medina, I know where Malik is going to be.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of get used to where scholars lie on the different spectrum of evidences, and you know, usually where their opinion would end up. And you also kind of learn concepts like tartib al-adillah, which is like, you know, the order of evidences according to individual mujtahids, because some scholars have a preference to some evidences over others, and they put them first, and as a result of that, this is where one of the major reasons why difference of opinion occur amongst scholars. Like this scholar puts this first and puts that next, and so on. And so it's an amazing book that has all of these different facets to it. But I think the beautiful thing, the way sometimes it was taught by some of our teachers in Kulliyah, was they would almost like get students to present it. It's like you take this view and you take that view and so on. And so it's almost like you can actually visibly see the back and forth among students, and how they're interacting with each other, trying to defend the opinion that was allocated to them. And it was such a good experience. And you know, you wake up every single day and you see these sort of like interactions. It really makes like, it's a book that almost, if taught properly, it brings knowledge to life. Although in reality as well, I remember Shaykh Abdullah Zahim always used to say that it's not a book for the mutafaqih, it's a book for the faqih. Like if you're trying to learn fiqh, it's a terrible book. You kind of need a book that kind of teaches you, you know, to go through a madhab. It's a book that, you know, somebody's already learned the basics, he can go through and see, you know, all these differences and so on. But it was such a wonderful experience. I think that was one of the things that kind of drew me to Kulliyah, because I think sometimes like education can be very sort of like just like, you know, information. Like, you know, it's just like you come across a hadith and there's an explanation and this and that, and it's very just structured, and I've seen that in hadith where it's just like raw information, and you just have to understand it and learn it and memorize it and the rest of it. And I think with Shariah, it was a little bit more than that. So it's like, even though there's evidences, there's ayat and hadith and so on, but it's about like understanding it, and you know, like you didn't understand the ayah correctly. The meaning of the ayah is in fact this, and it's supported by this, and you know, there's all these back and forths, and
it's interesting. It is stimulating, intellectually stimulating. It's interesting, and it really is just enjoyable, literally enjoyable. It's like, okay, this is what they say, but what's the reply to what they say?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? And how does he reply to what their reply is? And it's like, it is so engaging, literally.
Utilizing the mind and everything, and really getting to you benefit from that. But I think probably and I'll probably just stop with this point, inshallah, on this one. But ikhtilaf is an innate sort of reality that will continue in the creation of Allah. And Allah Azza wa Jal created us with that purpose in mind, with you know, that the fact that ikhtilaf will continue to occur and will remain within the creation of Allah. وَلَا يَزَالُونَ مُخْتَلِفِينَ إِلَّا مَنْ رَحِمَ رَبُّكَ وَلِذَلِكَ خَلَقَهُم. And so many of the scholars of tafsir, I think Sa'di and elsewhere, do say, you know, لَا يَزَالُ خِلَافُ باقٍ مَا زَالَ الْخَلْقُ مَوْجُودًا. Like, as long as the creation continue to exist, differences will occur. And so it's not about like putting an end to differences, it's more about like understanding how to deal with that. And I think that was a huge thing about Kulli Sharia. It's almost like navigating differences more than it is about, you know, getting us all to almost like agree on something.
On one,
because we're never going to agree.
That's not going to happen anyway.
It's part of the creation of Allah. Allah has created us with that, you know, the intellect, and you understanding something your way and you understanding something my way. And as a result of that differing in something, but it's almost like we kind of have to reach a point where we kind of understand what's an acceptable difference, what isn't. And I think that aspect of Sharia, I think, is really wonderful. I remember, and with that, I'll end this point the last time. I'm sorry for that. This was long-winded.
It's beneficial. It's really profound. I think it's
the first coursework we did in Kulliyah was a summary of Shaykh al-Islam's book on the excuses of the individual mujtahid once they make a mistake. Once they named the Risala, so a summary of these a'dhar the Shaykh mentioned, talking about, you know, like,
inshallah, I'm gonna have you teach that book here. We haven't gone through that book yet. If you don't mind, inshallah,
we'd love to.
That would be amazing. It's such an important book, and it needs to be taught.
So with Kulliyah, it was, you see the spectrum of all this khilaf. You start to understand that it's all based on evidence. So there's not like, one of the things that you can learn in other sort of facets of studies, and if you were to like purely focus on a hadith book, is like, this is the hadith, and whoever opposes this is
gone against
wrong.
the hadith.
Exactly. So it's a very black and white sort of thing. But once you start to view it as a there's so many evidences, and the mujtahid take different approaches to these issues, and as a result, that's where the differences occur. And also, you're taught along the way as well how to behave when you do differ with a scholar. I think you get a very well-rounded sort of student of knowledge that is able to behave properly, not just with the scholars of Islam, but also with like individual members of society that differ with him in these aqwal. And so with that, you kind of like, and I think that's the thing I probably loved most about Kulli Sharia is the balance that he gave you. So you leave with being somebody that's really reasonable in how you interact with the rest of society and so on. So it's really beautiful.
You did a master's on a subject which is connected to that, and I'm assuming that your love of this topic was impacted on that. We'll come to that in a minute, your master's. I'd still want to stay with you in Kulliyah at the moment. It sounds like it was really powerful and beneficial. Outside of the Kulliyah, what was your, did you have time to study outside or not really? What was your life like outside?
I'd pick and choose classes to attend outside of the Kulliyah. I think one of the things was, and again, it's an offshoot of that whole experience of the different teachers and what they give. And I think different teachers almost like have a different impact on different students and so on. And as a result of that, you kind of learn, oh, you know what, I really like the impact that this scholar has on me. I think one of the best things that happened to me was, I think there were two individual scholars that I really loved their classes in Masjid Nabawi. One was Shaykh Sulaiman Ruhaili, and I loved these like fiqh and usul classes. And I loved attending that. And the other was Shaykh Saleh Sindi. And I think Shaykh Saleh's Aqeedah classes were just, you know, even now when somebody says, I know some Arabic, and I want to study Aqeedah book, like, you know, if you know some Arabic, don't waste time, you know, attending my class or anybody else's time. Just, you know, commit to a sharh of Shaykh Saleh Sindi, because you'll see a whole different. It's sort of, for me, like the whole. I think sometimes it's very possible that we kind of view our teachers in like such a, like, put them on such a high sort of pedestal where we view them as this, and I think it is a beautiful thing to have, where you really like love your teachers in that sense, and it's very important. How do you benefit from people you don't have any sort of
love,
respect or love, or you see their status in your eyes and everything? And for me, I think like Shaykh Salih Sindhi was almost like a walking Ibn al-Qayyim.
Yeah.
I felt like everything he said just hit my heart.
Yeah.
And I love these Aqeedah classes as a result of that. Any book that he taught, like just wanted to attend and really benefit from. And there were other teachers as well in Masjid Nabawi, which was, you know, alhamdulillah, it was, you know, I wouldn't say it was like the 90s and the golden era where you had all these different, you know, giants that were teaching at the time. But I think there was a lot of khair in Masjid Nabawi and the other masajid in Medina.
And there still is today as well. And there, inshallah, will continue to be. Shaykh Salih Sindhi was, when I had Tawheed 1, the first year of Tawheed in Shariah, he was a teacher. So, and it really set a standard, because the book he taught was his own book. This was when he first started teaching, actually. It was Qawaid in Understanding Tawheed or Aqeedah. I forgot the name of the book now, but I've still got it here. And it was such a good book that when he came to the college and he did a dawrah at the college when we first opened, I'm like, Shaykh, can you teach that book that you first taught us back then? Right? Because it was such an impactful book. It was literally the gold standard for how to understand and be firm in Aqeedah, right? Taslim al-Nusus was the first one. And it was like 10 Qawaid, which were really important. And that's something which I think is really valuable for a student to understand Qawaid and principles, which you get in Sharia a lot as well.
I was really honest, subhanAllah. Like sometimes I remember, like even now, like, you know, you'd study a book with him, and then say, for example, you move on to the next book, like I'd attend these Aqeedah Wasitiyah, Sharh in Masjid Nabawi. And then after that, I think when he moved on to like Aqeedah Tahawiyah, and he'll go to like the very same topics again. And in my mind, like the way, because one of the things I would do is I would like go over his sharh, summarize it, take everything I could, and I even use it as material for when I would teach the course or teach the book in a course or a program or something like that. So I remember, like, I'll start, like, I would attend a class and say, oh, he's going through, like, Mas'alat al-Hawd today, from, like, the events of Yawm al-Qiyamah, the Ponder of the Prophet. I was thinking to myself, can you really mention anything more than what he already did in those classes? And somehow he manages to open a whole different door, and it's like, to me, it felt like I probably knew 10% of that class, and 90% was you know, almost like new learning and all these different things come up. And he's somebody that never ceases to, you know, surprise me in that sense. And even Shaykh Sulaiman as well, like a lot of his classes were like that. Like, I don't think it was it was like I would say it all goes back to how much effort they put into preparing for these classes. And you could really see that. So it's the amount of preparation, you know, with regards to all the knowledge that they would, you know, prepare for this class. I would say the practicality of it as well. The structure. The impact that some of these issues that they're going through would have on the individual. You know, subhanAllah, like you would think that certain things are just like things that you kind of need to know, you'll be aware of, from like issues to do with the ghaib. And then somehow it really touches your iman, and you find a way of trying to exemplify certain things, or do certain things, or do act upon certain things, so that you can attain those realities. And I think, you know, there's all these different facets to the way that they taught. That was really beautiful. So Kuliya, like Haram days were amazing.
I think one of the things which you just touched on, which is really important, is the difference. The impact that it has isn't a result of just coming and turning up and teaching. There's a lot that goes into preparing a lesson as well, which is what really matters, and it shows when a teacher does do that, and it's what lasts with the student. Even they can see that there's preparation done. They haven't just come, sat down and started teaching basically as well. And that's even for students now that are graduating or are teaching now. It's important to fully prepare your lesson so that the delivery is good, the knowledge is beneficial, the impact is there, all of that as well. So what made you decide to stay and do a master's? You'd already been there for 6 years, maybe 7. What made you say, okay, I'm going to do another? Because some people are like, oh, I can't wait to get back to the UK. 6 years is long enough. I need to start my life. Were you married or with children? Or
no, I got married in master's. It's like several years, after it. Several years of being in the master's. I got married quite late. But no, subhanAllah, what it was with regards to like Kuliya, again, going back to like Shaykh Falah, for example, I remember this was one of those moments that really hit me. Was I think some brothers went to visit him in his hotel. I think maybe he was going Hajj, or maybe he was coming back from Hajj. But he was in a hotel in Medina around Hajj season, either before or after. And I remember I'd come along as well with the brothers to go and meet the Shaykh, and we're kind of sitting in this like sort of like a sitting area. I can't remember. I don't think it was a room. I think it was like a sort of like an area in a hotel where where everybody was kind of meeting the Shaykh. So I remember I was sitting on the floor, like really close to the Shaykh, like on his right side or left side. And I think the brothers were just asking questions. And he was responding back, rahimahullah. And I think at one point he kind of looks at me and says, you know, everybody here is asking a question. Don't you have anything to say? Yeah. So I've kind of felt like he put me on the spot there. So I kind of said, you know, Shaykh, I'm in my last semester of the Ma'had. Yeah. This is, by the way, before any of this has happened, like me missing the exam and everything. Yeah. I said to him, oh, look, any sort of like advice as we're going to, you know, this next stage of, you know, thing. Yeah, and he kind of says something, subhanAllah, that I felt like was probably the most honest thing I've heard in my life. Yeah. He goes, just enjoy your time in Kulliyah. Yeah. It was the most enjoyable phase of my life. MashaAllah, yeah. And upon like starting Kulliyah, I'd realized that, you know, the interaction that you have with other students, the times you revise together, the back and forth. And this is, you know, that famous statement of, you find, I think, some of the books of Manaqib Imam Shafi'i, where he says, rahimahullah, was narrated from him, al-ilmu bayna talamid. That knowledge is actually, true knowledge is what is like sort of studied between students. Yeah. And that this concept, and I think it's become pretty normalized now, where people kind of want to just sit in their own room and have all this maktaba and just like sort of like study at a distance and so on. But I think that was, I think when you have to go to Kulliyah every morning, that kind of becomes foreign to you. Yeah. And that was probably the best experience, because you kind of realize how much you gain by you know, interacting with others. And similarly, when you leave Kulliyah and you go like home, or you know, you go to the haram in the evenings and you're revising something with a student, especially when exam season comes about, you realize how much you potentially could have misunderstood it if it wasn't for that student kind of saying, you know what, you kind of, because we all have that innate flaw, we can misunderstand things. Yeah, 100%. And so that interaction with another student to try and like help you properly perceive things and you know, clear that sort of misunderstanding. You may have mismemorized something or misunderstood something, or you may have heard the teacher, but you thought he meant something, but he meant something else entirely. And all of that again can happen again, because you know, you're still in that journey of like still perfecting your Arabic language, or you know, in that, you know, improving on it. And so I felt like the thing that I loved the most from Kulliyah, besides, you know, the subject itself, was the interaction with friends, students, you know, fellow students, and you know, well, like utmost respect. Like every single one of them, like, you know, moments in my life I'll do Umrah, and I just remembered, like, you know, I had such a wonderful interaction with that Indonesian bro. I don't know where he is today, but you know, may Allah, you know, forgive him for his shortcomings. And Kulliyah was amazing in that sense. And I sort of wanted, my sort of idea of Magister wasn't that I wanted something specific when I was applying. I sort of just wanted a continuity of like what I enjoyed so much of like studying with you know, friends and fellow students and so on. I realized later on that obviously Magister was very different. It was not that at all. I wasn't in for, you know, the whole. I wish I could redo Kulliyah, you know, redo a bachelor's. Because maths is completely different. You spend a lot of time on your own. But yeah, that was sort of what I wanted. Yeah, Alhamdulillah didn't know that at the start. You might have chosen it. 100%. I mean, one thing I say to students when I'm going to do talks at ISOCs and stuff, I always start off by saying, look, as a student at university, this is probably the best years of your life in terms of the amount of freedom you have. You can discuss, you can be with people. After you got to start working, you start a family. It's a different type of life. It's a good life, but it's not the same as being a student. You see what I mean? So extending that as much as possible and making the most of it while you're actually a student is really important. Not wasting time, and the other stuff you can do afterwards, right? But you're only a student for a certain amount of time. So you started your masters. What was your topic, and what happened before you started your masters? And so with again, it was like a masters was wait, sorry, let me stop you first, because a lot of us don't know the process as well. What's the process to apply for students that are considering it themselves? Is it varies from year to year. So for my year, I think 2018.
Yeah.
I started. So yeah, I applied late 2017, and then the rest of the process was early 2018.
Yeah.
And I started in September.
Yeah.
We had a combination of your GPA, which is the accumulation of like your grades across the different years that you've studied.
Yeah.
Plus, I think that may have been like 25%. I think about 50% would have been an exam that you do, so like a specific exam in the faculty that you're applying for.
Yeah.
And I think for my year anyway, I think it changes every single year. Right now for my PhD exam, it was a bit different. I'll explain that.
Yeah.
But the other 25% back then was an interview.
Mm.
So you have to go through an interview in the faculty that you apply to. So what would happen was, and to be fair, this is again, I kind of looking back at it, I'd say applying to a master's in Medina is more difficult than a PhD. And the reason for that is the, for example, Shariah, you've got about, I think, several thousand, I think maybe 3,000-4,000
Yeah.
that graduate every single year.
Yeah.
Obviously, not all of them are going to apply for a master's, but
A
there's going
large
to be
number.
large number, and the faculties are quite limited. So you've only got fiqh and usul and qada, qada is Shariah together, and iqtisad. So just 4 faculties, and possibly hundreds, if not thousands of students trying to like
take all the spaces. Yeah.
The scholarships available are only 15 per faculty. 15. Yeah. So it's like you've got this huge demand. Yeah. And almost like just like 15 sort of seats available in each one. Each thing.
So it's not easy to get.
It's not easy to get in. Yeah. So it's fierce competition. Yeah. And like every grade matters. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to say. Like PhD wasn't like that. It was the complete opposite. So the PhD exam that I sat was 40 students for the faculty of Usul, and we had 10 seats available. 10 scholarships. And even alhamdulillah, like I did get through, but it was significantly different to the masters, where I can't remember the exact number, but you'd potentially be looking at hundreds per faculty, and then only 15 being available. So here, at least, it's probably like a quarter of a chance. There, I don't even know what the ratio would be like. It was really crazy. So I sat the exam, and I came like after everything was accumulated, the GPA and my test score along my interview, I came 16th out of the 15 spots that were available. So across all the students that applied, I came up on the 16th, sort of like on a cumulative sort of grade, or the total that was assigned to every single student. So I'd missed a scholarship seat by probably less than even a grade, like less than like one. So I just I remember like I was packing up my bags, putting all my books in these boxes so I could get them shipped back to the UK. And I went off to my final Umrah. So I went Mecca with a brother, a very close Russian friend of mine who did get accepted. And I went to the hotel. We checked in the hotel. I dropped my phone and everything in the hotel. I don't really take my hotel to the Haram with me. So I thought, just get the most out of your du'as and everything. You don't know when you're going to be back in Mecca again. It was almost like a very emotional trip. And I remember it's just like
a farewell type.
Yes, you don't know when you're going to come back. Obviously, with living in so close in Medina, it's like you're going there every single month or so. I was like, the first dua, just making dua for teachers, and the second one was making dua for fellow students, and people would just come up in my mind. It's like, I don't know what this opportunity, this last trip means to me, but let me just try and make the most out of it, and also like remember everybody that helped me in my journey so far. And subhanAllah, I finished my Umrah with a brother. I think we grabbed food, I think it was, and we got back to the hotel.
Yeah.
Now, I sort of, and this is one of the best things about, I think those years, and I think you'd probably have the best stories in that regard. I actually kept a brick phone in those years.
Yeah.
So I didn't have like the
A
smartphones.
smartphone.
Yeah, so obviously with a smartphone, it's like, you know, everything kind of just shows up right away. With, you know, those like sort of these older phones, I would just look for like see what's the new message and just, you know, read it quickly. And I couldn't even properly like determine where this message was even from.
Yeah.
It was like just a random, like it was a really old phone. It's just a random message, and it says that the Amada of Dirasat al-Ulya basically been accepted. Come back and, you know, sort out your paperwork for your application.
While you could just on Umrah,
I've not even
Umrah.
like
You haven't even
changed
taken
my
off your
ihram or anything like that. And I was just really surprised. And at first I thought it was because, you know, the thing about like it's a random number and it's a weird message. And I think to myself, because with a smartphone you kind of like know, you know, who sent it and so on. I didn't know whether it was a prank or whatever else. I don't know who would be pranking me like that anyway, but it felt a bit weird. Like I didn't know what was going on. So I told the brother that I'm with, like, oh, they've asked me to come back. And I remember it was like midweek that we went for Umrah. So I think we went back to the Haram the same night. And then the next day we just checked out the hotel and drove straight back to Medina. I think it was like a Wednesday. The following after that, Thursday, I went straight to the Ahmad. I was like, oh, I received this message. Was this from you guys? I was like, yeah. You know, they've added on this one extra spot for you. And so you
got accepted.
Yeah, you got accepted. Come do your paperwork, and then, you know, you can travel back. Alhamdulillah. It didn't stop there. So after that, we had this thing called. It went on for a couple of years. So what happened after that was, in the same year group that I got accepted, they added on another group of students to each faculty that were from Aqaliyat al-Muslima. So it's like Muslim minority sort of countries. So if you were a passport holder of a country where there's a minority sort of thing, they added you on as well. So I was kind of accepted between these sort of things. So I was kind of very joyful, because even if I didn't get in on that additional 16 spot,
you got in on
I would have got in on that one anyway. So it was just really
good.
smooth.
It was a blessing. Big blessing.
Alhamdulillah. But yeah, so yeah, I applied for the faculty of Usul al-Fiqh.
Usul al-Fiqh.
And it was for me, I think the biggest thing that I really liked a lot in Kuliya, and it used to get me thinking a lot. Not sure that it was always good for me, because a lot of these conversations where I felt at the time where I didn't always have the responses, but I felt like they were very interesting. I always one of the things I always felt was from the beauty of the Sharia is that I sort of from like studying fiqh in that manner, some things become kind of clear to you, which is that there is a black and white sort of thing. So there are things that if somebody was to say today about the religion of Allah, you'd say that this is completely unacceptable. And there were things that were acceptable even though people differed in. And so it's almost like there's a line that if you cross, whatever you've said was completely wrong. And so it's almost like, how is that line formed? You know, what is concrete and what is, you know, questionable? What is like debatable and what is a difference of opinion? And it sort of seemed to me like it would go back to understanding the evidences and what was a valid interpretation, what was an invalid interpretation, and that is what causes the difference of opinions and separates what is a black and white from, you know, those grey areas where there was a valid sort of difference of opinion among scholars of Islam. And so this whole topic was like al-qat'u wal-dhann fi shara, and I really liked the concept, because it seemed to me that, for example, I knew, even though I didn't know a lot at the time, I sort of knew that, like for example, Christians, it was a free fall. Like there was no structure, there was no black and white. Like you could come out with anything today and somebody would kind of just accept that. Whereas if some random individual said something about the religion of Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it was incorrect. And then the Muslims would turn around and say, you know, that's not
wrong.
a valid, this is a valid valid disagreement, but this you can't go anywhere near. So it seemed like there was a line. I felt like some of that as well was sometimes applied in Aqeedah issues. So you could like the scholars of Ahl Sunnah would fault the scholars of other sects by saying that, you know, this is an invalid interpretation because, you know, you've got it all wrong. This is not based on, you've misunderstood the text. And again, it seemed to go back to the interpretation of evidences. So I sort of always liked that discussion because for me it was like understanding what was concrete and what was not. And once you find those principles that lead to, you know, the certainty in the religion, this black and white sort of understanding, you could apply that to the best of your ability in other areas to get the best possible interpretation and understanding. It was safest and what was most correct. And that was sort of my thinking. And so I felt like usul was the best sort of, you know, direction to get that.
Go to,
So that was my main preference for like usul al-fiqh. I think there were other things as well that were very valuable in the science of usul al-fiqh. And obviously it's got immense fawaid. A huge one was when, you know, you're talking to like other sort of like in the context that we find ourselves in, and like when you speak to non-Muslims and so on. I've always felt like, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's wisdom, and He is Al-Hakim, the all-wise. His wisdom knows no bounds, and everything that He legislated is for such a great reason, and whether we know that or not, but this can be, if you study these particular sort of issues that come up in your life or that some non-Muslims might ask about, they can be explained in a level where every rational person would accept, and would accept like the authority of Islam, and that it's a religion that meets or like it's in line with the intellect, and it doesn't tell us anything that opposes al-aql and so on. And so I felt even in the context of where I lived, I felt usul was going to be really important, and that kind of leads me to the maqasid sort of angle. But I think usul in general was a very valuable sort of like faculty in a science before that, but the faculty itself, it offered a lot. Some things I didn't know until after I started studying in the faculty, but it's a very it is sometimes viewed as a little bit more difficult. They in many cases they have a standard that, you know, other sort of faculties were a bit more relaxed on for some things, and like I get why, because I think they are very like tough on even basic things like defining things. And so what it is like you have to spend all this time studying just the mustalah, right? The mustalah, waraqat, and what is aam and what is khas and everything. And so it's like everything in usul is a bit like it's very heavily emphasized, very argumentative. It's trying to get to like a very proper sort of understanding of something.
Okay. These subjects, usul al-fiqh, difficult, maqasid, takhrij al-furu' ala al-usul, and then we have qawaid al-fiqh, for example. Just for the kind of lay person or ordinary person, give us simple definitions of usul al-fiqh. What do you study in it, and how is it different from maqasid, which we will speak about, because that's inshallah hopefully towards your PhD. And then qawaid, and then the last one, takhrij al-furu' ala al-usul, then we can speak about your master's subject.
Okay. So usul al-fiqh is basically just the principles that allow for you to stipulate rulings from the Quran and Sunnah. And so what you have is, you have the Quran and Sunnah, they're in the Arabic language, and you have ahkam, then you have rulings. And so how do you get from the individual evidences to those rulings? So it's almost like somebody asking, وَأَقِيمُ الصَّلَاةِ, it shows the obligation of prayer. Wujub as-salah, the fact that salah is mandatory and compulsory. But how did we understand, you know, the compulsion, the forcible sort of thing? So the bridge that connects that is a principle of usul. And sometimes it's just a logical principle. Sometimes it's based in the Arabic language. There is a debate over whether some of them come from or derived from the ilm al-kalam and a discussion regarding that.
Yeah.
But the point is that these are principles that allow for a valid interpretation of evidences so that we get the rulings that we have.
Yeah.
And so the bridge between them is known as usul
Usul
al-fiqh.
al-fiqh.
And the meaning is just like the principles of understanding.
Yeah.
So it's
Brilliant.
like, the methodology of understanding, the way of understanding the text of the Quran and Sunnah. That is what this science is about.
Brilliant.
And from there you get to a valid interpretation, and also you understand what is not a valid interpretation. And a valid interpretation. So next point is
Next
maqasid.
one is, we'll get to maqasid, I think, qawaid al-fiqhiyya, and then maqasid. So these are subjects,
okay.
yeah.
Or
maqasid, if you want to go there next.
No, I think qawaid al-fiqhiyya is a bit of a nicer one here.
Okay.
So if you were to look at it from, say, I think the best way to look at it is a timeline perspective.
Yeah.
So you have Abdulwahid as the mujtahid, right?
Yeah.
So you've got evidences, and then you've got rulings, a set of rulings that you come to. Usul al-fiqh is how you got to your rulings, right? So you've got Abdulwahid, the mujtahid, he's got all these ahkam, he wrote a book. Yeah. Now somebody comes along and he says, you know what? We can string together a whole group of rulings to kind of show like there is a commonality across different chapters.
Yeah.
And that's qawaid al-fiqhiyya. So these are like the sort of like, after you have a set of rulings across different chapters, now you have like a common feature across different chapters. And so these are principles that show the common ruling across different chapters. So they're very different to usul al-fiqh. Yeah. You can almost say that usul al-fiqh is like how you got to the rulings before you had rulings. Yeah. And qawaid al-fiqhiyya are, how you can sort of like group these rulings after those rulings. Yeah. So it's like pre-rulings and post-rulings. Yeah.
Amazing.
So that's the difference between usul and qawaid al-fiqhiyya. But there are a lot of other differences.
Yeah, that's nice.
And there's an overlap as well, which is probably best avoided right now. Qawaid al-mushtaraka, but that's a whole different science.
And then now we go over to maqasid briefly.
So maqasid, I think the best way to view that is understand this concept of the theory of evidences in Islam. Yeah. It's sometimes referred to as darajat al-istidlal, which are the different layers of providing an evidence for something. Yeah. Now, it's the way we commonly sort of view it is almost like you have three circles, one within the other. So you've got an inner circle, and one a little bit bigger than that, and outside of it, and then one bigger than that. Yeah. So three circles, one within the other. The most inner circle, we refer to it as a nas, right? So these are the texts of the Quran and the Sunnah. Yeah. So evidences, explicit evidences that tell us things. Now, those texts are explicit, they're clear, or maybe they aren't. But the principle that is used will allow us to take clarify, a viewpoint with regards to that. Yeah. But the point is that there is a text that is interpreted by way of what we said was usul, or the principles of usul. Outside of that, the second circle outside of that is what we refer to as al-qiyas. So the text respond to things that occurred during the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and so there is a direct context that relate to that. Qiyas is where you have a similarity to that context, but they're not exactly the same. And so what you need to do qiyas and exit that first role is that first circle is find what we refer to as a illah. Yeah. And a illah is any time the sort of like the reasoning behind the ruling of the text that the Quran and the Sunnah bring about. And so, yes, the circumstance of the analogy, the qiyas, is not the same, but because the underpinning and the reasoning is the same, you would apply the same ruling. You just basically take the ruling of the text and apply it to the qiyas, or make qiyas, and you apply it to the scenario of the qiyas. Yeah. And you just have to make sure that the illah, that's the most important pillar of qiyas, that the topic of like the reasoning and the rationale of the ruling is intact and the conditions are met. that is the scenario where the scenario of an issue that didn't occur during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, or an issue that wasn't dealt with directly by the evidence of the Quran and Sunnah, but there's a level of similarity, there's a shabah, there's a similarity to the scenario of the text.
Yeah.
The last scenario is when there's no similarity. And so it's almost like saying, there are all these things that occur in life, and we see this more today than ever, where there's so many things that are occurring in our world today. You think of AI, you think of this, you think of like all these different things that never existed before. And a good scenario, for example, is surrogacy. Yeah. Or like children by way of all of these different methods that, with, science and everything, and science has introduced. Now, there is no almost like a resemblance to anything of the time of the Prophet ﷺ that you can say we're going to make an analogy from. But we basically, what the scholars would do in that sort of generic framework of evidences is find what the most like the general sort of benefits and the maslahah and the objectives that Islam serves. Yeah. Because there's nothing similar to this scenario that you can say, you can almost like project onto what occurred in the Prophet's life. And so the need for maqasid is where there's absolutely no resemblance, but you can try and look for ways of observing what the Sharia wants us to observe. Yeah. And so it's a science of looking out for the objectives or finding the ruling by way of the objectives of the Sharia where there is no resemblance in the scenario to any scenario that happened during the times of the text and so on. Amazing. And so as you can see, you're going to get principles even from just like that sort of framework. You're going to get principles. So we have a very famous principle that's known as La qiyas ma'an nas. Right? If you've got an explicit text, you shouldn't make an analogy. You can make istinas, which is almost like support and double down on the evidence with an analogy and sort of like strengthen with it. But you can't make a completely different analogy that opposes the text when because that's not how the structure works. Similarly, you can't go around looking for like the objectives of the Sharia if there is a text. You can support it. You can say, look, this is supported by the general sort of objective that the Sharia looks after. But you can't go around and make rulings that completely oppose the text of the Quran and Sunnah simply because you think that there's an objective there. Because that's almost like claiming that there is a ta'arud, like this sort of innate sort of contradiction within the legislation of Allah. There can't be. So that's how it works. But with that, you kind of understand where maqasid falls. Maqasid is a heavily contested sort of subject because the majority of the scholars will actually hold it's actually not even a science. It's a part of the science of usul, and it's almost like an aspect of like a form of qiyas when there is no commonality, and you're looking for the broadest form of applying what we call the illatul illah, which is the hikmah, the wisdom behind the legislation, and you're kind of like trying to apply that. So that's sort of what maqasid is.
Amazing. And would that be why there's not that many books authored on it as a subject in and of itself? And what is the main book authored on it for people that don't know?
So
primary text in the subject.
It is just sort of discussed in the books of usul in general. So you find when you study like the different types of qiyas and the different formats of creating an analogy, they mention like different formats, and some of them would quite literally apply to the whole when they speak about like the qiyas al-ayn fi jins and all of that different sort of like the different formats, ikhala and this and that. Maqasid is an aspect of that. So in essence, most books of usul would actually cover maqasid in some form. It became a sort of like a distinct form of study further down like in Islamic history, when certain scholars started to separate it in individual works. And even that, there's a wisdom behind But I think the proper application, you rarely see it up until our day and age, where you start seeing all of these things that are completely different to anything that preceded. So I think the emphasis is got today is one that it's never garnered in human history. But in the past, it was basically just almost like saying like these different sort of rulings that you find in the Sharia, they're in line with that wisdom that the Sharia comes with. You know, the legislation of Allah is you know, the pinnacle point of wisdom and you know, looking after like, you know, your individual welfare and social welfare and all the different benefits that people reap from following the legislation of Allah. So yeah, maqasid, its individual application is more contemporary, but in the past it was more, you know, just proving the wisdom behind the different things that the different legislation of Allah, and almost like connecting it to its rulings, which the two kind of go hand in hand anyway. So you kind of follow that sort of framework to get to the application of maqasid today.
The last topic, which is connected to it, تخريج الفروع على الأصول. And this is a topic that really made me love fiqh and usul when I was in the Jami, because I studied a book on it and I told you about it. You did your masters on it. MashaAllah. So summarize that topic first of all, and then tell us a bit about your masters afterwards.
Okay, takhrij is most people, when they think of takhrij, they think of takhrij al-hadith, which is it takes different forms, but for most that is azw al-hadith al-masdar, which is taking back the narration to its original sort of book that recorded it. It's you know, the original work that states it, chain of narration and so on. Takhrij al-fiqh is a whole different thing, but there is a commonality there as well, which is taking back the rulings to its original principles. And one of the things that I do want to highlight, inshallah, for any viewers, and I think it's really important to know, because we live in, I remember earlier I was saying also about the madhabs and the issues there, and I wish we kind of I know it's life is a journey, so I think some things you kind of learn as you grow and so on. But the thing about madhabs is it's such a robust system. It's not just a set of rulings that just are attributed to Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Malik or Imam Shafi'i or Imam Ahmed or any other mujtahid. More specifically, these four madhab. These are rulings that have really been through the mill. So you know, when you see takhrij al-fiqhi, it's almost like these rulings were there, and you study them from and this is before you even get to like the sciences that relate to qawaid al-fiqhi, which is a whole different sort of mill as well. So takhrij al-fiqhi is about taking back these isolated rulings to their original principles. So what it is that you'd study, like for example, you take a fiqh issue, and you'd almost like ask the question of, well, this is the opinion of Shafi'i regarding this, but where does it stem from? It's almost like you're tracing it back. And there are four ways of tracing it back. You trace it back by way of takhrij al-furu' ala al-usul, which is where you almost like study it from the aspect of, you've got the fiqh issue, and you connect it to the principle where it comes from. You've got the opposite, which is where you're finding the principle to begin with, and finding what the asl of the imam was, and that is takhrij al-usul min al-furu', or takhrij furu' ala al-usul, phrase it in both ways. You've got takhrij al-furu' ala al-furu', which is where certain individual rulings impact other rulings. And that's a whole kind of worms as well. So you find it in the books of fiqh. And you also have takhrij al-usul ala al-usul, which is where some principles lead to other principles. And there's a correlation between them as well. The masters was heavily focused on these four. We had a subject, the takhrij al-fiqhi, and an amazing teacher as well, hafidhahullah. And the sort of like the beauty of retracing all of this is that you're almost like these individual imams, both how they sort of derived at rulings, the principles that they used,
Yeah.
and the proper application of these principles, so that we can get to more rulings.
Yeah.
Because this is one of the basic theories of fiqh, right? Which is in Tariq al-Tashri' we learn that the time of the Prophet ﷺ, like there was a level of basata,
Yeah.
which is like life was very simple,
Yeah.
and there was sort of like very specific sort of scenarios that occurred that the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba had dealt with, and as time got on, like life got more complex and more issues occurred, and they required rulings.
Yeah.
And so the concept of takhrij kind of matches that as well, because it's almost like saying, well, Shafi'i dealt with a bunch of rulings. We then need to apply that to all these other issues that have now come about, but we want to deal with them with the ijtihad and the lens of how Shafi'i passed rulings.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like retracing the principle that he used, so we can apply that to more principles, more scenarios, so we get more rulings.
Yeah.
And so with that, you get a
widening.
madhab
Yes.
where maybe the bulk of the rulings that we have today that are recorded in individual madhab, the individual scholars that this madhab is attributed to may not have actually spoken about.
Yeah.
They spoke about a fair share of them.
Yeah.
And we also know the principles that they used to derive at these rulings, but those principles were reused to derive that more rulings that didn't occur during their lifetimes.
Yeah.
And so that is what takhrij is in a sense.
Yeah.
And the reason, again, takhrij is so important is because their understanding of the religion was so much more important and respected and more valuable than our individual ijtihad.
Yeah.
And so one of the things you can look at as well is how unique these madhahib were.
Yeah.
And these scholars, like, where are you going to find somebody as talented as Shafi'i in the Arabic language?
Yeah.
Where are you going to meet a scholar where supposedly he met a Sahabi like Abu Hanifa, right? Who's supposedly Anas Malik, right? Really young.
Yeah, that's right.
Where are you going to meet somebody who recorded almost like the generational sort of actions of the people of Medina going back to the time of Sahaba, like Malik with Amal al-Medina? Where are you going to find somebody that memorized a million hadith like Imam Ahmad? And so it's almost like these scholars have this sort of very unique traits to them that the Ummah said, you know what, their understanding was accepted in their time. They'd gained this great status, and the Ummah observed and looked after their knowledge generationally. And through takhrij as well, we found a way of replicating rulings through their lens. And so that's the beauty of takhrij.
Yeah, amazing. That is really, really, really kind of opened it up. And there's a couple of questions I want to put out there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you can answer them in kind of short fire.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Right.
One of them is revival of madhabism, blameworthy or praiseworthy? Or not, neither?
I would say praiseworthy in general.
Yeah.
But I would also say I understand why people might view it as blameworthy. But yeah, it's without trying to go into it for too long, there are things that happened in the history of Islam that led people to have a very like negative sort of outlook to madhabism. But it's not because of the madhab. It's more about, again, the conduct of people. And you got to differentiate between the two.
You know, you was going to go hadith 3 times, right? And that was, I'm assuming, part of it because madhabs were based upon taqlid madhmum, right?
Not really.
Okay.
I think...
Putting the question out there anyway.
Okay,
Taqlid.
Okay.
Taqlid.
Yeah.
Taqlid madhmum, taqlid which is not madhmum, or taqlid is madhmum anyway. Is all taqlid blameworthy? Is all taqlid good? Is there a middle ground between that?
I think before we even get to is it praiseworthy or blameworthy, I think it's important to understand it's necessary.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean?
So taqlid being blind following or following, or blind following, or is it just following?
No, it is blind following. You're following somebody blindly without actually knowing the evidence. But it's more the fact that I remember there's a statement, I can't remember the exact scholar, and if my memory serves me right, and it is actually Shaykh Al-Albani, it's actually shocking. But it definitely one that the listener has to double check. But I think the statement was التقليد واجب قدرا وشرعا. That taqlid is actually obligatory, both by the divine decree of Allah and by the legislation of Allah. The divine decree of Allah, because there are imagine can you turn around and say to a new Muslim that has no understanding of even evidence and tell him you need to go and find the evidence and act upon that? Can you say to a young child that is not capable of finding the ruling, and he's he's not even reached age of puberty. You're just trying to force him to pray, and he asks for a simple ruling that connects to prayer. You tell him, no, look, you need to. Here's Fath al-Bari. Find what you think is strongest. It's not possible. So even from a perspective of the divine decree of Allah, we grow through, and even like education sort of curriculums and so on, take that into consideration. There's a lot of theories and things that we learn in our lives through like science and so on that there is a point in time where we're not told multiple opinions, we're not told about evidence. It's just, this is a fact almost. Take it, and then as you grow, you start to discover, there's more of a conversation and what is the evidence for it, and you start to go into it, because that is human nature. You're able to sort of like understand more and sort of get to the different nuances and the details that you form certain realities, and from that you can have a conversation regarding it. The older you get, the more you understand about something, the more knowledge you have regarding something. And that's obviously not something that everybody, or especially not in every single issue for every single person, is possible for. So the concept that all taqleed is madhmoom is, to me, I think it's a wild thing. I look at it today and I think that is. And the thing was, even at the time, I sort of, when I wrote hadith, I knew that. Like, I knew that it's not possible for every single person to get at the individual truth regarding every single issue, every single time. It's just simply not possible. You famously have that chapter, right, in the Alam al-Muqa'in al-Qayyim, where he makes the argument that even a mujtahid has to do taqleed sometimes. Right? Shafi'i rahimahullah famously said, any mas'ala that I come across that I don't have an evidence for, uqallidu fiha Ata ibn Abi Rabah. Like, I'm gonna go and do taqleed of this famous tabi'i. So that is somebody of that caliber going and saying, I'm gonna go and blind follow. And so it's necessary. But I think I also understand why the whole the blameworthiness also comes about, because again it connects to the extreme of the madhabs, and sometimes you've got this sort of like this black and white scenario, and people say, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, ala ras wal ayn, but this hadith I'm just going to put over there. I'm going to stick to my Abu Hanifa and or Shafi'i or Malik or whatever the view might be. And sometimes it can come across as like, where is the ittiba'? Why don't you just look into it more? The obligation upon us all is to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The first obligation upon is literally the shahadatain, right? The meaning of Ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, the fact that he is the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. A huge part of that is annahu yuttaba', that we should follow him, and he has that right over us, that we show that complete fellowship to his messengership sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's the meaning of that. And so there are boundaries that sometimes have been crossed, but I don't think that those boundaries should lead to us completely throwing aside everything about madhab.
So if you're speaking to a young student of knowledge, and he's a serious student, he's going to study a madhab, right? 2 questions. 1, what madhab do you recommend him to study, right? Because sometimes people ask what's the best madhab. Obviously what they mean is what madhab I should study. And number 2, how to safeguard him from this taqlid madhmum, i.e. in the future potentially rejecting evidences that are clear because, well, it's not my madhab, and I'm Hanafi, I'm Hanbali, or I'm Shafi'i. How do you combine?
Well, I think the first one, which is what madhab should you follow, I think it's all the madhab of khair in him. And I think every single madhab, there is so much beauty to, and I think the beauty of Kulli Sharia is that I don't think you can ever walk away from having that experience of walking to a classroom and having seen, like, there were days where I would wake up and think, why am I not a Hanafi? And then those days like, I love Maliki, the Maliki madhab so much, and the ijtihadat of Malik, which is so amazing. And sometimes you see the beauty of why so millions of Muslims essentially follow each of these different madhab, right? And so I don't think there's any one that is better than the other. I think it's just I think in essence, we kind of just need to view madhahib as a almost like a syllabus. And if you have like a teacher that can teach you, and you have this opportunity, and it's a beautiful opportunity. It's in a journey of, it's such a beautiful journey where you can actually understand like not just the rulings of these madhahib, but also how these scholars got there. I think you should do that. Like whatever opportunity you have in front of you, and this could be like in some lands it's that, in another land it's something else. And so it's whatever you have the opportunity to study, just go ahead and do it. And if you have multiple things, maybe start with one and do the other. That's what I would do. Looking back at it, but
I mean, I always tell people, students, I'll say that if I get the opportunity to study the Hanafi madhab,
exactly,
I'm going to take it if I find a teacher that can teach it.
I love this statement that of Shaykh Muhammad al-Jami, where he said, anybody that sticks to like one madhab once he got the opportunity to learn the other or another is a ruba' faqih. I found that that's so good. Like you're a quarter of faqih, because like these madhab complete each other in so many ways. And again, it goes back to that whole the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal created that ikhtilaf within the creation, that created that differing within. We would never know the beauty of like the Sharia without all this back and forth, and without like there's so much depth that came about as a result of these differing, and that if we open ourselves to it more, and we didn't really have this sort of like this partisanship, and we never really attached ourselves to one so much where we hate and despise the other, we would actually see the beauty of the Sharia by way of these back and forths and the deep discussions that then we derive and we get to by way of that. So I think learn as much as you can, and I think the more you learn, the more beauty.
What's the message to some of the young students then today that are studying madhab, say they're studying the Hanbali madhab and they say I'm Hanbali, and they haven't got to that depth yet, but they're kind of now pushing the Hanbali madhab like that? For example, specifically Hanbali madhab, because that's what's obviously common amongst graduates that have come back and they're teaching.
I would say, sometimes it's just a phase of life, and I think it's important to just consider it that. But I think, like being like zealous and passionate about something is both a blessing and a curse. And it's important to consider it both. So I'll give you this background story to this, and the reason why I say this now is because sometimes when you're very strong and passionate about something, it does come with like certain behaviors that are not reasonable towards another or something else, or something that is different to whatever you're passionate about. And yes, that's problematic. And I do think most people outgrow that anyway, so there's not really much reason in dealing with that, except for example, maybe the teacher who, should enforce a level of adab that they should maintain towards other scholars, because that's important. Not having, proper etiquette towards the scholars of Islam and works of knowledge and so on could potentially prevent you from, actually acquiring knowledge. And so that's quite harmful. But, like the essence of like the whole being passionate and zealous is, it also overlaps with something else, which is the level of sincerity that we have towards that thing as well. And so, yes, it comes with like a certain behavior, which is you're sort of stubborn and hard-headed, but it's also because of the fact that you see that to be the truth, and the truth means more to you than anything else. And this is where I'd want to go back in my younger years, and I don't want to go into the full story right now, but I remember I got caught I got caught up in something, and it was in Saudi Arabia, and I remember, subhanAllah, at the time it was a bit of a situation where I got stuck somewhere, and I just remember the hadith of the 3 people in the cave and the supplications I'd made, and I started thinking about something I could make. I could supplicate to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with a form of like tawassul, something of righteousness. But I hoped I was sincere. And as I was thinking, I started thinking that I couldn't find anything. I remember just like whilst being blank, I said to myself, do you know what? Like the beginning years of seeking knowledge, yes, I was a bit passionate and sometimes a bit stubborn in my ways, the hadith thing and all the rest of it. But I felt at the same time, it came with a level of sincerity, because at the end of the day, the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal meant more to me than anything else, and any other affiliation, and any of this and any of that. And I just remember supplicating with that, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, alleviated my problems through that, or hopefully by way of that. And the reason why I say this is because it's very normal for us to look back at, like that age group, or even look at other people in that sort of phase and see the negatives that brings about. And there are negatives. Yeah. But I also think that age group as well, it coincides with like a level of sincerity that is unmatched as well. Yeah. And so it's like your journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like the first,
it's a necessary high phase. Yeah.
It coincides with like a level of like sincerity, a level of like a level of like almost like, you're so Allah, right? You're so truthful in your actual desire for Allah Azza wa Jalla was with Him in the hereafter and so on. But it also comes with a level of stubbornness where you can't be told anything, and you also think you're Shaykh al-Islam and all the rest of it. And I sort of think
you can't separate the two.
You can't separate the two, and I think we should just accept people as they are. Yeah. And I think as you go through that journey, I think you'll get to a point where you kind of settle in somewhere.
Hopefully.
Inshallah,
That's 100%. What normally happens for most people.
Yeah. As long as that good intention is there, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will guide you to something positive. But I think the one thing you could say to people in general is utilize that phase of your life in that which is beneficial. Yeah. And so what we generally do get, and maybe I should face the camera, which is don't waste this time in engaging in Twitter debates or on X or whatever else. Spend that time actually, seeking knowledge, memorizing the Quran, doing something of benefit to you, where years on, that passion and that sincerity and that drive led to something. You've built something with that. And I think it's the misuse of that phase that we should be bothered about. So I think the drive of like almost pushing a madhab on somebody else is expected. Yeah. It's just when it becomes an absolute waste of time, where you could be sitting in the house of Allah and memorizing something, or memorizing the book of Allah, or any other method or anything else. I think that's where the problem really comes.
Yeah, Jazakallah, and that's really, really important. You inshallah, finish your masters. Barakallahu feekum, Jazakallah, and may Allah reward you and make it a means of benefit for us in the UK as a community, inshallah, and the Muslims, inshallah, to benefit from the knowledge that you gain doing that, because it's not easy. I think people underestimate the amount of time and effort that's spent as a student of knowledge in another country, away from your family, for a long period of time, in books, reading, and it's downplayed. It's not really given its due, in my opinion. And inshallah, Allah put barak in your time and your wealth and your health. You're going to proceed to do a PhD, inshallah. What's your topic? We were speaking about a topic earlier that you wanted to talk about. I like us to just touch the topic. Inshallah, because it's very important, and I hope you do write in it anyway. And then what? Tell me how the future looks for you in terms of studies.
I think the journey that most people in the master's phase in Medina will tell you about is this phase where it's called like a bahth and khutta. You search for a research topic, and it's a phase where it's really enjoyable. Because it involves a lot of reading. It involves a lot of, I wouldn't even call it reading. It's really skim reading, because you're trying to find something. And I'll tell you some of the stories that I've actually had in that, because it's quite interesting. And I think as well, when you've got a deadline, and it's something I actually don't like about myself, but I think maybe it's also been one of the best things that actually happened to me, which is you've got a deadline to meet, and so you have to get something done. Because if we were to just grab something and just give it all the time we could possibly give it, we'd never get done with anything. But it's also not nice, because you actually want to enjoy an experience of something, and meeting a deadline is not always the nicest thing. So with finding a khutta, it's like you go through these phases where you're bouncing off ideas with your teacher, your supervisor for your research paper, and all the rest of it, and you're always looking for something. And quite often it starts with you find it in one, which is a research title, and you suggest it to your supervisor. Your supervisor says, give it a try, and you start to collect material on that topic. And once it reaches a certain, sort of like size of masail, of topics that you can cover in that research paper, you present it to the faculty. And if the faculty, like a board of teachers, will sign off on it, if they think it's suitable, so they'll look at it from the aspect of whether they think the topic itself is of any use. They'll look at it from the aspect of you as an individual, whether you're suitable to that topic. They'll look at it from the aspect of sometimes even the size of it. It has to be split amongst a number of students and so on. And so it kind of goes through several layers of like discussions and so on. And they'll get back to you and say, oh, you know what, go ahead with this or don't, or edit it, and then we'll process it and so on. So I had a few of those type of, and again, it's not something unique to me, but you find everybody has that. I think one of my first ones was مقاصد شرعية وأثرها في التعامل مع غير المسلمين. It's like objectives of the Islamic law and its impact on the dealings that occur between Muslims and non-Muslims. So it's almost like going through all of the issues in fiqh that concern the relationship between Muslims and non-Muslims, and finding like the objective or the wisdom behind that ruling, and sort of like discussing it in light of what the different scholars say about that and so on. In light of what we mentioned about maqasid, the objective quite often isn't to apply a ruling. It's almost just to find a ruling. And obviously with that you can get to a point in future where any other issues might appear where you could have potentially applied those objectives. And the beautiful thing is that you do find a lot of discussion amongst the scholars of Islam where they do mention wisdoms and objectives of this chapter more particularly, but across obviously all the different chapters of fiqh, you find books that deal with that. You find so many different issues that come up, literally from tahara all the way till the end of fiqh. You find all of these issues that relate to some sort of a relationship or an exchange that happens between a Muslim and a non-Muslim, and understanding the wisdom behind that. So I gathered these issues and sort of topics, but the faculty turned around and said, you know what, this is not really a master's sort of thesis. It's a bit more of a PhD sort of topic, and I hope to do that hopefully in my PhD, inshallah.
It's an amazing topic, inshallah, and there's a lot more that we can talk. We were having a little discussion about, for example, certain topics like the issue of marriage. Zakat, the issue of marriage to a Muslim and a non-Muslim, a Christian or a Jew, and how would you apply it now in the West, in the UK specifically, where the differences for back then and the other issue of zakat, from the categories of zakat, inshallah. But we'll go into that in more detail. I think we've taken up so much of your time.
No, it's all.
But what I'd like to do is, to close with, I guess, two things. Tell us about what you're doing at the moment. Where are you teaching? What books are you currently teaching?
So at the minute, I'm back in Leicester. I do things both online and in person in Leicester, in my father's masjid, which is Quba.
And then Medina College soon as well. I'm sure we're going to get you down for a program if we have to.
I really love the idea of what you have here, which is why I made this trip today. And I really wanted to in the past as well. I think institutions are so important. And the reason we kind of want to do that in Quba, inshallah ta'ala, in the, hopefully foreseeable future. I think, I think the beauty of it, the thing about institutionalized learning in institutions and so on is that it's a huge part of our heritage, and it overlaps with the concept of madahib and so on, because it is a form of an institution. When we look at Western universities today and everything it has offered to humanity, it's the madhab that cater towards that. It's the fact that you can take a degree and you can find a job in any other sort of corner of the world, because you can almost exchange that for some sort of a points or whatever system any other country might have had. That was the madhab system that allowed for that, because it's like you study in a syllabus and you go and become, you study in Baghdad and you start working in Qahira, in Cairo. It was the madhab that formed that. And I think the development of this innovative form of learning, I think if we look at our heritage, it's such a huge thing. I think it kind of falls on Muslims, and especially students of knowledge, to always find, you know, that what is the next thing to kind of facilitate knowledge, and to create a sort of like the next system that, you know, humans in general and Muslims more specifically can truly benefit from, just as, you know, it was that Islam was at the forefront of innovation in general, and learning, and the different systems of learning at one point in time. And I think institutions are a huge thing for that, and I think Medina College is, you know, doing amazing things in that, and I think the growth in that, and for us to do more in that is really what the goal should be. I with Quba, it's kind of that sort of thing that we're looking for. So it's just more of like, you know, hopefully to start classes and higher learning.
What are you currently teaching, and where can people find you?
So at the moment, it's just the masjid mainly. So like Kitab al-Tawheed, and Sirah, like Urjuz al-Mi'iyya, Ibn Abdul Aziz al-Hanafi, and, you know, Tafsir mainly, things like that. That was in person in the masjid, and online I kind of do a set amount of classes, but hopefully we'll be releasing on our website soon.
Okay, amazing. What advice do you give to students in the UK, first of all, studying in institutions, and also new students now in the Islamic University of Medina, or in other institutes of learning abroad?
I would say advice to students of knowledge in general is, you know, truly understand the greatness of what you're seeking. You know, this is not any knowledge. It's knowledge that connects the creation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the creator, the sustainer, the one that gave us everything that we have, all of these blessings and favors, and the greatest of those favors we don't even realize, which is, you know, the fact that Allah has been guided us, and all of these sort of like these blessings that we don't actually physically use in our day-to-day lives, but, you know, it's our moral compass, and you know, the spiritual uprightness, and the rest of the things that we have. And so the students of knowledge and Muslims all around, we have so much to offer, you know, people, especially in this country, and all around in every part of the world that Muslims find themselves in. But the students of knowledge have so much more to offer, because they're at the, you know, at the helm and at the forefront of Islamic knowledge. And so it's important for us to understand the greatness of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us for. And it's not an ordinary mission, it's a mission that literally comes with coming to know Him, and all the different facets of the knowledge of the Sharia that you know, individual Muslims might gain. You know, we spoke so much about fiqh and madhabs and all the rest of it. One thing I did want to say was that every single student of knowledge in any institution that study anything pertaining to the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is doing such a great thing. And every single one of them gets a share in those ahadith that speak about, you know, bi'idhnillah, and the hadith that speak about the virtues of the seeker of knowledge, and the rest of the things that the Prophet ﷺ encouraged. It's very easy for us to also glamorize a certain form of knowledge and say, you know, this is the knowledge. But we can't forget that, you know, all of that is part of that ikhtilaf that we spoke about. Of, you know, I mean, you know, how boring would life be if everybody was a doctor? And
that's right.
It's similar, you know, to in our realm when we speak about Islamic studies, that the beauty of the Sharia also come about when, you know, you've got one person who specializes in fiqh, and another person who specializes in hadith, and all of these different facets of the Sharia and different sciences of you know, Islamic knowledge make the study of Islamic studies so much more enjoyable and palpable, and you know, really sort of allow us to experience all of the beauty of the Sharia from all those different angles. And it's important that we remind ourselves of that as well, which is, you know, the beauty of the Sharia by way of all of these different sciences, and that every single person that takes part in, you know, in reviving or benefiting the Ummah from any of those different angles is doing such a great thing as well. I think to people in Islamic institutions, more importantly, and the Islamic University of Medina, more specifically as well, I think it's the beauty of institutional learning. I think it's such a huge thing. Don't undermine it. And yes, you know, you find like individual halqas and classes and so on away from the sort of like the colleges and the faculties of the kulliyah, of the Jami'ah in general, and other sort of institutions. But you gain things from those colleges and so on that you don't get in the haram. And I remember some of our teachers would tell us that things like when it comes to like things like Mabadi' al-Ashara, like the introduction of the elementary sort of sciences, knowledge that pertains to an individual science. I mean, where you're going to find like the journey of fiqh and the history of fiqh being taught in like a random halaqa in a random masjid. It requires like an institution to kind of teach that. And so it's important for students who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen for, you know, to them to go to Medina or any other institution, to realize that those institutions are actually there for a reason. And it's very easy for us to forget that and think, oh, you know what, the haram, you know, 1,000, you know, it comes to 1,000 salawat and this and that. And we forget about all the amazing things that the Jamia has to offer, and we ignore that, but it's really not befitting. And part of gratitude is realizing all those blessings that Allah Azza wa Jalla chose us for. And we show gratitude to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that.
So don't skip your lessons in the Jamia basically because you were up late and doing other studies as well. Make sure you focus on Jamia studies as well.
Absolutely.
Barakallahu feekum. Jazakallah. I feel like I've had to cut it short, and I think we might need a part 2 because there's a lot more depth that we could go into on the topics of maqasid and usul al-fiqh and takhrij as well. I want to speak a lot more about the topics in more depth. So inshallah there'll be a part 2, and hopefully inshallah we'll have you inshallah when we can drag you, or not drag you because you came willingly to the college for
I'll come willingly again.
for more talks inshallah. Barakallahu feekum, jazakallah khair, inshallah. Hopefully see you again soon in another in the Maktaba. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.